Ayaan Hirsi Ali made international headlines in 2004 following the shocking murder of Theo van Gogh by a young Muslim radical. The murderer pinned a note to Van Gogh's body, warning Hirsi Ali that she would be next. Somali-born Dutch parliamentarian Ayaan Hirsi Ali joins us today to discuss her life since that event. The reason that that man said you were next was that you have been seen as an outspoken critic of Islam and its attitude toward women. Is there anything that you have seen in the last 5 or 6 years that makes you feel that Islam is moving toward a more equitable relationship with women?
Well, yes. First of all, there are more and more Muslim women standing up and saying, not leaving the faith like I have, but standing up and saying, we want a change here. I don't know of the names in the United States, but I know Irshad Manji in Canada,
Yeah.
Nejla Kelek in Germany, Nahid Salem in the Netherlands, Shadot Javan in France. So that gives me a lot of optimism. I've also, since I've been in the United States, spoken to women from Saudi Arabia, from Iraq, from Afghanistan, who are all saying we want a new feminism and a feminist movement within Islam. And I admire that very much and I encourage it.
But it isn't something you yourself feel comfortable with. You have left, as you said, the faith, and you don't seem to think that it's worth trying to reform the faith from within.
I do. I just want to point out it's very complex, and we have to make some distinctions. First, let's make a distinction between Islam and Muslims. Islam is a set of beliefs. Muslims are individuals who can be persuaded to change their mind. Then there are Muslims in Muslim countries and Muslims in open societies. And when Muslims within open societies demand that everyone else, or at least women living in Muslims living in open societies, relinquish rights that they already have, then I would say no. We don't need to reform Islam first to have these rights. We have them already. But when you are in a Muslim country, for example in Saudi Arabia, and a Saudi woman was telling me, we are as feminists going to reinterpret the Quran, then that's something that I say is very courageous, and do it, because every little step you take towards reformation is fantastic. It's just that these distinctions are very, very important.
But you say, I mean, in the book you say that when you hear about the issue of the veil,
yes,
you know, many people have pointed out that all that the Quran says is that women should be dressed modestly, and that is the basis of the liberal interpretation. But you take it one step further. You say, why should women have to dress modestly if men don't have to dress modestly? After all, can a woman not be sexually excited by the sight of a man?
Yes.
And why this inequality? So
yes,
you're going further than even a liberal interpretation of Islam.
Yes. When I have a conversation with fellow Muslim women who cover themselves, we talk about why was the hijab invented in the first place? Why did women have to veil themselves? Now you go back to a context when there was no law. The Prophet comes and he says, listen, maybe it's good if women stay in their house and if they cover themselves, which in that context, within the 7th century, was the right solution to a problem that was then there. Today, within open societies, I've discovered, as I explain in my book, that men are capable of restraining their sexuality, and that we women don't have to cover ourselves or have to be confined or have to relinquish our rights. So it's a matter of progress. It's a matter of saying, if you understand that you can groom young boys to become men who can control their sexuality, then wearing the veil, staying at home, or confining women into the home becomes redundant.
How do you think you achieve progress or the so-called reformation in Islam? Do you think it comes, is it a battle of ideas, or is it that you need these societies to modernize on the ground? And then, in some ways, as the Christian world did, the reality of economic and political modernization forced the church to catch up. Which do you think needs to happen? Do you think what we need is lots of Muslim intellectuals talking about how to liberally interpret the Quran and the Hadith, or do you think you need more merchants and businessmen and bankers who actually don't care that much about religion and just want to do well in life?
I think you need both. you need the merchandise, you need the economic growth and progress and so on, but it is also essentially a battle of ideas. And in the battle of ideas, you always start with the person who founded or who brought the idea. So in debating Islam, and then within Islam, I would start with the Prophet Muhammad. He is the moral guide. We consider him a moral guide, those of us who are brought into Islam. And I would say, can he still be a moral guide today in the 21st century? Are there things that he did in which he was an example that we can adhere to, for example, in an open society or even outside of an open society? And are there things that we should not and cannot and should not do?
What are the things that you think we cannot follow?
Well, one example is men, sometimes 40, 50-year-olds, marry 9-year-old, 10-year-old, 11-year-old girls. And when that is described as something bad, they would say, but then I am a Muslim and the Prophet Muhammad is my example because he married a 9-year-old child. Now, I would say if that did not happen, if no man married a 9-year-old child, that would not have been, this whole debate would not have been relevant. But as thousands of men are taking little children as their brides.
This is mostly in Africa, right?
In Africa, but also in Arab countries. Ayatollah Khomeini changed the law in Iran from, I think, 15 to 9. Had himself married a 9-year-old child, and again justifying that in the name of the Prophet. When Bin Laden says, go after the infidels, ambush them, kill them, take their property, then we as Muslims have to wonder, why is he doing that? And he says, you Muslims must do it because the Prophet was the example. And I think it's time to say, okay, was the Prophet right or wrong? In what context did he operate? And so on and so forth. So discussing the Prophet is the...
You know that Muslims say that the Quran is the word of God. It can't be reinterpreted, it can't be loosened. It is not like the Bible, a collection of stories
Yes.
that have religious and divine origin. It is itself divine.
Yes.
So how do you get around that problem?
By again making that distinction between Islam as a set of beliefs and Muslims, and taking each and every Muslim individual as one who is endowed with reason, who can be persuaded that the Quran is perhaps not the word of God, that it's been written by human beings at a time when the world looked very different, and that as Muslims born into Islam, you can read it differently, you can change it, you can say, let's see it in its context. But you are right, first step is towards accepting that the Quran is not the word of God and that you can change it.
You briefly had a situation where your Dutch citizenship was revoked by a politician there, and now it's been restored. You're in Washington. Do you think American attitudes on this subject are different from European attitudes? You know, there are people who say Europe has gone soft, it doesn't want to fight this battle, it is, you know, accommodating itself to the vast numbers of immigrants within it. How do you think of this problem?
I think that the problem with Europe is not so much immigration as it is Islam. The way Islam is debated and the way when Islamic movements, radical Islamic movements, sprout in Europe and make demands, and they use freedoms to destroy freedom, then they seem to get away with it all the time. Whereas in the United States, it seems as if Islam is a matter of foreign policy. I'm here for 6 months, and every time when I talk to people about Islam, it's always about the Middle East, and it's about Al-Qaeda. It's not about women being facing honor killings or a radical Islamic movement trying to commit a terrorist act here. In the UK, it's different. It's something that's like, you know, it's every 6 weeks an terrorist attempt is foiled. So
but there are many Muslims in America. Do you think it's just that the Muslims in America have assimilated?
That's what I am being told. I'm told that the Muslims in America are more assimilated. Again, I'm not sure if this is, if I look at organizations like CARE, I would say perhaps the jihadis in America have a much longer term agenda and try to infiltrate the system, try to win hearts and minds, and then ultimately come to getting domination, whereas the Muslims in Europe are very young men, very violent, and trying to, not all of them certainly, but those whom we see today in action, like Mohammed, they want the caliphate now, today, and they think that the fastest way to get it is through terrorist acts. And in the United Kingdom, in the Netherlands, in France, the kids that we are facing who are plotting these terrorist acts are not immigrants, they are citizens. They are third generation Frenchmen or third generation British or Dutch.
There's a book here by Dinesh D'Souza, just come out, in which he says that the real reason we have incurred the wrath of radical Islam is because the West has become a decadent society. It celebrates lasciviousness, permissiveness, pornography. I suppose Holland would be a pretty good poster child for some of these woes, as would, of course, parts of America. And he argues what we should do is the right-thinking people in the Western world should ally with conservative Muslims who also stand against this kind of openness, and that should be the way we solve this problem of the clash of civilizations. What do you think?
Striking one fundamentalism with another fundamentalism.
Exactly.
No, I'm not a proponent of that. The proposition that Europeans and perhaps Americans have become decadent, that can be defended. But the decay is not about the existence of pornography or permissiveness. The decay is, for example, in Europe, that the history class, how can we, as immigrants and as natives, talk about a shared future when we don't have a shared past? And what Europeans have neglected doing is teaching their past, how these open societies came about, teaching that to immigrants, telling them about the values, telling immigrants in Europe, you have rights once you come in here, but there are a set of obligations too, and then explaining to them what the obligations are. And for those who say, I don't care what the obligations are, I'm not going to do them, penalizing those. I think that is more in the direction that we should be looking, and keeping European constitutions alive. One of the striking features of the United States is, you're told again and again and again about the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. You cannot become an American citizen unless you've taken and passed an exam. That's different in the various European countries, and I think we should be looking more at that than at having, who did Mr. D'Souza want to make the changes? Is the state going to force people not to watch pornography? We've had that debate before, and that debate has been solved, and I think that that's not the problem.
Let me ask you a last question. You've grown up in Somalia, you've undergone female mutilation, you've been in Holland, you've had death threats against you that are very real, very serious. What keeps you going? Aren't you scared?
I am scared, but also I think there's a lot of attention focused on what keeps me going, but look at the people who survived civil wars and who come here. Look at the people who survived Auschwitz and who came out and started families and businesses, and I think it's in the human being to go on. And by the way, I enjoy these freedoms that I just know for 14 years. So I feel a certain obligation to say, I think that radical Islam is a threat. This is why I think it's a threat, and then just hope that people listen.
Well, an amazing book by an amazing person.